The scent of roasted chicken and herbs filled the kitchen, a familiar aroma of togetherness. I smiled, glancing at the photo of Eleanor on the mantelpiece. You would have loved today, my dear, I thought. It was Father's Day, a special occasion. I had been looking forward to this moment, to the illusion of a happy, gathered family. The doorbell cut through my thoughts, and I opened it with a prepared smile. My daughter Jessica and her husband Preston walked in, bringing a cold draft of the outside world with them. Preston's parents followed, silent and observant. I noticed Preston's silk shirt. It was sleek and distant, much like the way he scanned my living room. He shook my hand, a light, almost invisible touch, then quickly pulled away as if he were afraid of getting dirty. The meal began awkwardly, and then it started. Here's your gift, Dad, Jessica said, and a small, crumpled piece of paper flew across the table, landing next to my plate. A Powerball ticket. If you get lucky, she giggled, remember that half of it is mine. That voice, once my joy, was now as sharp as a shard of glass. I just nodded, the rough fingers of a lifelong mechanic touching the flimsy paper. Thank you, dear. But the attention had already moved on. With a theatrical flourish, Jessica ceremoniously pulled out a beautifully wrapped box. And this is for the father who has truly taken care of our family, she said, handing the box to Preston. Inside, under the warm yellow light of my dining room, were gleaming cruise tickets. A Mediterranean cruise, $13,000, Jessica announced, her voice full of pride. Preston's dad deserves everything. $13,000. The number echoed in my head. Preston took the tickets, nodding. See, this is real appreciation. Your daughter really knows how to show affection, Arthur. He used my first name, a subtle disrespect. My sister Eleanor, who sat across from me, put her fork down with a heavy thud. No one said a word. The silence was worse than any criticism. You always taught me that actions matter most, Jessica said, as if justifying herself. She looked at Preston, and they shared a look I couldn't decipher, a secret agreement that excluded me. My chest tightened. The memory of long nights at the Charlotte Motor Speedway, my hands black with grease, my back aching after a 16-hour shift so she could go to college, came flooding back. The lottery ticket in my hand was no longer a joke. It was a verdict. It valued me at exactly $2. I don't remember how the rest of the dinner went. When they finally left, the slam of their luxury BMW's door echoed down the quiet street. I sat alone in the empty dining room, staring at the $2 piece of paper. It wasn't just a gift. It was a statement. And in that moment, though I didn't know what I would do yet, I knew I wouldn't let that statement be the final word. The next morning, the house was just as quiet as I had left it, but the silence felt different. It was heavy, suffocating. The memory of the night before played on a loop in my mind. The tossed ticket, the gleaming cruise passes, the dismissive look in my daughter's eyes. Sleep had offered no escape. I made coffee, but it tasted bitter. The familiar comfort of my own home had vanished, replaced by the ghost of my daughter's disrespect. I couldn't stay there. I found myself driving to Chen's Diner, a small, honest place that hadn't changed in 30 years. David Chen was behind the counter, just as he always was. He and my Eleanor had been friends long before I came into the picture. He saw me walk in and simply nodded toward my usual stool at the counter, a fresh cup of coffee already waiting. You're quiet today, Arthur, he said, wiping down the counter. Father's Day treat you all right? I stared into my coffee. It was something else, David. I didn't have the words to explain the humiliation. David didn't press. He just refilled a sugar dispenser, his movements slow and deliberate. You know, he said quietly, Eleanor was always so proud of you. She used to tell me, Arthur's hands can fix any engine, but his heart is what's truly priceless. She never cared for fancy things, just the integrity of an honest man. His words were a balm on a raw wound. He looked at me, his eyes full of a wisdom that only comes with time. Jess has been different since she married into that Hayes family. It's a different world over there in South Park. Sometimes people forget where they came from. He didn't need to say more. Knowing someone else saw it, that I wasn't just imagining things, was a small comfort. I returned home feeling a bit steadier, but the house was still cold. I sat down at my old desk in the corner of the living room to go through my monthly ritual, reviewing my bank statement online. It was a habit born from decades of careful saving, of making every dollar count. Mortgage payment, utility bills, groceries. Everything was in order, predictable and safe. And then I saw it, a charge from a company I'd never heard of. Premium travel services. The amount was $13,603. My breath caught in my throat. My heart hammered against my ribs. It couldn't be. I checked the transaction date. It was from the week before. The exact cost of a Mediterranean cruise. A gift bought with a flourish of generosity. But it wasn't her generosity. It was mine. The realization hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. The emergency credit card. Years ago, after Eleanor passed, I had made Jessica an authorized user on one of my accounts. For emergencies only, I had told her, a safety net. I had trusted her completely. I had trusted her with my money. But more than that, I had trusted her with my love. And she had taken that trust, that love, and used it to buy a lavish gift for another man, all while throwing a $2 joke at me. The insult of the night before was no longer just a slight. It was a calculated theft, a deep and bleeding wound. I sat there for a long time, the numbers on the screen burning into my memory, the silence of the house pressed in on me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate act of betrayal. My hand, shaking with a fury I hadn't felt in years, reached for my phone. I had to hear her say it. She answered on the third ring, her voice bright and impatient, the sound of traffic humming in the background. "Dad? What's up? I'm in the middle of shopping." My own voice came out low and tight, each word a struggle. "Jessica, I'm looking at my bank statement. There's a charge here from Premium Travel Services for over $13,000. A pause. Then, a laugh. It was light, airy, and utterly dismissive. "Oh, that?" she said, as if I were being silly. "Don't be so dramatic. I bought Preston's father his cruise. He's been so good to us, he deserves something nice." The casualness of it stole my breath. "You took $13,000 from my account without asking me, Jess." "I didn't take anything, Dad. I used family money for a family gift. It's not like you were using it for anything important. It was just sitting there, collecting dust." It was collecting interest," I snapped back, my control finally breaking. "It was my life's savings. That's theft, Jessica. You stole from me. It's not stealing when it's for family." Her voice turned sharp, defensive. "Preston's family has always been there for us financially. He helped us get the house. This is just returning the favor. It's how people who understand money operate." I gripped the phone, the plastic groaning under the pressure. "I am your father, Jessica. I raised you. I worked 60-hour weeks in the garage, my hands black with grease, to send you to college. And Preston helped us move beyond all that," she retorted, her voice dripping with condescension. "He's shown us what real success looks like, what it means to be truly generous, not just doing what you're supposed to do. He gives meaningful gifts, Dad. Not," she trailed off, but I could hear the unspoken words, "not $2 lottery tickets." The cruelty of it left me speechless. This was my daughter, the little girl whose scraped knees I had bandaged, the teenager I had held as she cried over her mother's death, the young woman who had once called me her hero. She was gone. In her place was this cold, calculating stranger. "Dad, are you even there?" "I'm here," I whispered, my throat raw. "Look, I know you're upset," she said, her tone shifting to one of cold rationality. "But you did what fathers are supposed to do. Preston's family goes above and beyond." The line went dead. She had hung up on me. I stared at the phone in my hand, the dial tone a mournful hum in the empty kitchen. My eyes landed on the lottery ticket I had left on the counter. The joke, the insult, the receipt for my own stolen money. It was a symbol of everything she had become. With a guttural cry of pure anguish, I snatched the ticket, crushed it in my fist until my knuckles were white, and marched to the trash can. The crumpled paper made a dull, final thud as it hit the bottom, joining the coffee grounds and other refuse of my simple, apparently worthless life. The night that followed was long and sleepless, but when the sun finally rose, the fiery rage in my chest had cooled into something hard and clear, like steel. The grief for the daughter I had lost was still there, a heavy ache beneath my ribs, but it was now overshadowed by a primal need for self-preservation. I had been a father for my entire adult life. Now, it was time to be a man protecting his own. My hand was steady as I dialed the number for the bank. When the customer service representative answered, my voice was firm, leaving no room for negotiation. "My name is Arthur Morgan," I said. "I need to immediately revoke all authorized user access on my accounts." The woman on the other end was professional and efficient. Within 15 minutes, Jessica's name was scrubbed from my financial life. New security questions were in place, new passwords set. With each click and confirmation, I felt a metaphorical wall being built, brick by brick, around the life I had worked so hard to build. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of control. That peace lasted until mid-afternoon. My phone shattered the silence, the screen flashing with Jessica's name. I let it ring twice before answering, bracing myself. Her voice was a shriek. "Dad, what the hell did you do to my card?" Hello, Jessica," I said calmly. "Don't you—" "Hello, Jessica, me. I was at Nordstrom in South Park. I was trying to buy a handbag, an $800 handbag, and my card was declined. In front of everyone. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? They looked at me like I was some kind of common person." The way she spat the word common made my stomach turn. "I'm sorry you were embarrassed," I said, my voice even. "But that doesn't change what you did." What I did?" She laughed, a hysterical, bitter sound. "I treated a man who respects our family with the dignity he deserves. Something you've clearly forgotten how to do. You're just sitting on all that money like a greedy old miser." "I am protecting myself, Jessica." "No, you're being selfish and petty and cruel," she screamed. "And you are going to regret this. I have friends, Dad. Important people in this community. People who understand what loyalty means. You've just made a very big mistake." The line went dead. I set the phone down, my hand unshaken. The storm had arrived, just as I knew it would. That evening, a morbid curiosity I couldn't fight led me to open my tablet. I hadn't looked at social media in weeks. Her post was the first thing I saw. It featured a professionally taken photo of her, her eyes looking red-rimmed and sorrowful. The caption was a masterpiece of manipulation. "It breaks my heart to write this, but my father has decided to cut me off from what has always been our family money. After years of me managing his affairs and helping him through my mom's death, he has suddenly decided I'm not worthy of his trust. All because I bought a gift for Eric, who has been more of a father to our family than anyone with money that was just sitting unused. I never thought my own father could be so cruel and selfish." The comments were a flood of digital sympathy. "Oh me gee, Jess, I'm so sorry. Older people can get so paranoid about money. Your dad should be grateful to have you. This is awful. Preston is a wonderful man. He deserved that gift." I scrolled through the comments, each one a small nail being hammered into the coffin of my reputation. They were strangers, friends of hers, people from the country club, all passing judgment on a man they'd never met, based on a narrative built of lies. I closed the tablet and sat in my darkened living room, the glow of the screen having faded. I was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and at that moment, I had never felt more alone, or more poor, in my entire life. The following evening found me in the same worn armchair, the television flickering in the dark, offering little more than a distraction from my own thoughts. The digital assault from Jessica and Preston had done its job. A neighbor who usually waved had pointedly looked away when I checked my mail. The cashier at the grocery store had given me a look of cold suspicion. I was a villain in my own neighborhood, a story told and retold on screens I couldn't control. I clicked through the channels, a mindless exercise. A sitcom from the 90s I'd seen 100 times. A cooking show with desserts I'd never make. The local news, discussing city council budgets. Click. The familiar, upbeat jingle of the North Carolina Education Lottery filled the room. "Good evening, Tar Heel State," the cheerful announcer chirped. It's time for tonight's Powerball drawing with a rollover jackpot of $120 million. I almost changed the channel. The absurdity was too much. Here I was, being publicly crucified for protecting my life savings, while someone was about to win a fortune I couldn't even comprehend. But a bitter sense of irony made me pause. I watched as the plastic balls tumbled in the machine. And tonight's winning numbers are, the announcer's voice took on a ceremonial tone, 7, 14, 23. The numbers sounded vaguely familiar, like a half-remembered melody. I sat up a little straighter. 35, 42. My hand froze on the remote control. A cold dread, mixed with a wild, impossible hope, crept up my spine. I grabbed the nearest envelope and a pen from the coffee table, scribbling as the announcer repeated them. And the Powerball is 18. Again, those winning numbers are 7, 14, 23, 35, 42, with a Powerball of 18. My heart was hammering against my ribs before my mind had fully caught up. I knew those numbers. I had stared at them. I had burned them into my memory in a moment of white-hot anger and disgust. The ticket, the crumpled, stained piece of garbage I had thrown away 3 days ago. I stumbled into the kitchen, my legs unsteady. The trash can sat by the back door, filled with the sad detritus of my lonely life. Coffee grounds, empty cans, the peel from this morning's banana. Without a second thought, I plunged my hands into the mess. I dug past the soggy paper towels and sticky food wrappers, my fingers frantically searching. The smell didn't matter. Nothing mattered but finding that small piece of paper. My fingers brushed against it, stuck to the side of an empty yogurt container. I pulled it out. It was damp, wrinkled, and stained with coffee, but it was intact. I carried it to the sink, as if it were a holy relic, and carefully rinsed it under a gentle stream of water, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it. I smoothed the fragile, damp paper onto the countertop, and I compared the numbers. 42. Powerball 18. They all matched. Every single one. I sat down hard on a kitchen chair, staring at the ticket in disbelief. The $2 joke. The gift bought with my own stolen money. The symbol of my daughter's ultimate contempt. It was worth $120 million. Jessica's mocking voice echoed in the silent kitchen, a ghostly whisper from a life that had just ended. If you get lucky, remember that half of it is mine. I barely slept that night, my mind a whirlwind of numbers and possibilities. The first thing I did the next morning was call the lottery commission, my voice trembling as I read the numbers from the ticket. The calm, bureaucratic confirmation on the other end made it real. I had an appointment to begin the verification process. I was a millionaire. It didn't take long for the news to leak that the winning ticket was sold at a gas station just a few miles from my house. My phone, which had been quiet for a day, erupted in a frenzy. Jessica, Preston. Jessica, again. 37 missed calls in the span of an hour. The voicemails were a frantic mix of feigned concern, veiled threats, and outright demands for our half. I listened to the first two, then deleted the rest. I simply set the phone face down on the counter and let it buzz itself into silence. Late that afternoon, a call came from a number I didn't recognize. Wary, I almost ignored it. But something made me answer. Hello? The voice on the other end was calm, deep, and carried an unmistakable weight of authority. Mr. Morgan? This is Richard Hayes, Preston's father. My heart leaped into my throat. I expected a lecture, a demand, a coordinated attack. I believe we need to talk, he said. I saw what my son and your daughter are posting on social media. I'd like to meet if you're willing. How about that place you like? Chen's Diner, in an hour. I was stunned into silence for a moment. He had remembered the name of the diner. Yes, I finally managed. I can be there. The diner was quiet when I arrived. Richard was already in a booth, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the worn red vinyl. He stood up when I approached and shook my hand firmly. Arthur, he said, his eyes meeting mine directly. Thank you for coming. He didn't waste time on small talk. I was there on Father's Day, he began as Mr. Chen placed 2 coffees on the table. I witnessed the entire disgusting performance. The ticket was a gift, a dismissive one at that. There was no agreement, No negotiation. It was an insult, plain and simple. I just nodded, unsure what to say. Richard sighed, a deep, weary sound. I raised my son to have integrity, to be a man of his word. I see now that in his pursuit of wealth he has forgotten the meaning of character. What he and your daughter are doing to you is not just wrong, it's unconscionable. He pulled out his smartphone, his fingers moving across the screen with practiced efficiency. My name carries some weight in the Charlotte business community, he said, his voice hard as iron. People know I don't suffer fools or liars. It's time I made my position on this matter public. He turned the screen toward me. He had been drafting a post on LinkedIn. As a witness to the Father's Day gathering at the home of Mr. Arthur Morgan, I feel compelled to address the slander and misinformation being spread online. I personally observed Miss Jessica Hayes present her father with a lottery ticket as a Father's Day gift. It was given and received as a gift. There was no negotiation, no verbal contract, and no agreement to share any potential winnings. The current social media campaign against Mr. Do So Morgan is built on a foundation of greed and falsehood. I have a zero-tolerance policy for dishonesty in my professional life, and that standard does not change for my personal life. I cannot and will not stand by silently while members of my own family attempt to destroy the reputation of a good and honest man. I read the words, my vision blurring slightly. "You don't have to do this," I said, my voice thick. "It's your son." "Yes, it is," Richard said, his gaze unwavering. "And as his father, it's my duty to hold him accountable when he has lost his way." His thumb hovered over the post button for a moment, then pressed down with finality. Almost instantly, his phone began to buzz. Then mine did, as friends of friends started sharing the post. We sat in silence, watching the comments roll in. If Richard Hayes says it, you can take it to the bank. I knew there was more to this story. Thank you for speaking up, Richard. Character is everything. Shame on those kids. The tide was turning. The truth, spoken by a powerful and credible voice, was cutting through the noise of the lies. I looked across the table at this man I barely knew, this unexpected ally. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't alone. 2 weeks later, I stood in a room so bright with television lights it felt like noon at midnight. The North Carolina Lottery headquarters in Raleigh was a world away from my quiet life in Charlotte. I felt out of place in my best suit, the navy blue one I hadn't worn since Eleanor's funeral, surrounded by bustling reporters and smiling officials. In front of me was a giant, comically oversized check with my name on it, and a dizzying number of zeros. A pleasant woman from the commission guided me to a podium. The camera flashes were relentless. "Mr. Morgan," she said, her voice echoing slightly through the speakers, "on behalf of the state of North Carolina, it is my immense pleasure to present you with this check for $120 million. There was a smattering of applause. I stepped up to the microphone, my heart beating a steady, calm rhythm. "Thank you," I began, my voice clearer than I expected. "This is certainly unexpected. I plan to use this blessing responsibly, to help others where I can, to pursue some old dreams, and most of all, to live a life of quiet dignity that would make my late wife proud." The reporters began shouting questions, but before I could answer, a commotion erupted at the back of the room. "Stop. That's my ticket. He's stealing from me." Jessica's voice, shrill and desperate, cut through the professional atmosphere like a siren. She and Preston pushed their way through the crowd of journalists, her face flushed and her designer dress looking out of place in her fury. The cameras, which had been focused on me, swiveled in unison toward the drama. This was a better story, and they knew it. "Everyone here needs to know the truth," she screamed as security personnel moved to intercept them. "That money is mine. We had an agreement. He's a liar and a thief." "Oh." A reporter, smelling blood in the water, shoved a microphone in my face. "Mr. Morgan, can you comment on this family dispute?" I looked directly at my daughter. Her eyes were wild, consumed by a greed so potent it had erased any trace of the little girl I had raised. I felt a pang of pity, but it was quickly replaced by a cold resolve. I turned back to the reporter, my voice calm and steady, carrying clearly over the chaos. "The ticket," I said, enunciating each word, "was a Father's Day gift from my daughter." I paused, letting that sink in. The specific circumstances of that gift have already been publicly and very clearly confirmed by Mr. Richard Hayes, Sr. A ripple went through the crowd of reporters. The name Richard Hayes, Sr. meant something in this state. It meant integrity. It meant power. It meant the truth. By invoking his name, I had checkmated her. Jessica seemed to deflate, the righteous fury draining from her face as she realized her mistake. The reporters were no longer looking at her as a victim, but as a liar. Security guards reached her in Preston, their hands firm but professional on their arms. "Ma'am, sir, you need to come with us." "I bought that ticket," she shrieked one last time as they were escorted away, her voice cracking with desperation. "Half of it is mine." But no one was listening anymore. Her public performance had become her public humiliation. The ceremony concluded quickly after that. As I was signing the final documents, I glanced out the large glass windows. I could see them in the parking lot, standing beside their expensive car, arguing. Preston was gesturing wildly, his face contorted in anger. Their greed, the very thing that had bound them together, was now tearing them apart. For the first time in months, a genuine smile touched my lips. The next morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table, a half-empty cup of tea in my hands, reading the newspaper article about my win. There was a small, tactful mention of a brief family disruption at the ceremony. I felt a quiet sense of closure. Just then, a soft, hesitant knock came at my front door. It was a sound so unfamiliar that for a moment I didn't move. Jessica had never knocked before. I opened the door to a woman I barely recognized. The designer clothes were wrinkled. Her face was pale and puffy without a trace of makeup, and her eyes were red-rimmed and swollen. She looked broken. "Dad?" she whispered, her voice fragile. Can we please talk?" My old paternal instincts stirred, a ghost of the man I used to be. I stepped aside and let her in. She didn't sit on the comfortable sofa, but perched on the very edge of an armchair, as if ready to flee at any moment. Her hands twisted nervously in her lap. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she began, the tears already welling up. "About yesterday. I was overwhelmed. I was scared. Preston has been putting so much pressure on me. I wasn't thinking clearly." The tears began to stream down her cheeks, a performance I had seen many times before, but this one was Oscar-worthy. "Our finances. They're worse than anyone knows," she sobbed. "We're about to lose the house. The bank is starting foreclosure proceedings. We owe almost $400,000, and Preston's investments, they've all fallen apart." She painted a vivid picture of sleepless nights and panic attacks, of trying to keep up appearances at the country club while their world crumbled around them. I was too embarrassed to ask for help before. "You know how proud Preston is. He would die if he knew I was here, begging you for money." I listened in silence, my face unreadable. I had seen this play before. The helpless damsel, the appeal to my protective nature. It was the same strategy she'd used as a teenager whenever she wanted a new car or a trip with friends. "You've always been there for me, Dad," she said, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. She reached out, her hand touching my arm. "I just need your help one more time. Just enough to save our house and get us back on our feet." I looked at her, my voice calm and even. "How much, Jessica?" $2 million, she said, the number coming out a little too quickly, a little too rehearsed. "It would solve everything. And it's nothing compared to what you won. You'd still have over $100 million left. The breathtaking simplicity of it. A $2 million solution for a lifetime of bad choices." I gently removed her hand from my arm. "Jessica," I said, my voice soft but firm, "I have heard these same promises from you before." Confusion flickered across her tear-stained face. "What do you mean?" "You stole $13,000 from my account without asking," I stated, not as an accusation, but as a fact. "You tried to destroy my reputation on social media. You tried to take my winnings by force in front of the entire world. And now you want me to reward that behavior by giving you $2 million. The mask shattered. The tears stopped instantly. Her face transformed, the vulnerability vanishing, replaced by a familiar, hard-edged anger. "So you're really going to do this?" she hissed. "You're going to let your own daughter become homeless while you sit on $100 million? I love you, Jessica, I said. And it was true. I loved the memory of the girl she once was. But I will not enable your choices anymore. She sprang to her feet, pacing like a caged animal. Fine, she spat. Fine, but don't you ever expect to be a part of Jake's life again. No more Christmas visits, no phone calls when he graduates. You'll be nothing to him. You'll die a lonely old man all alone with your precious money. The threats came fast and furious, each one designed to strike at my deepest fears. But they were fears that belonged to a different man. I looked at this stranger in my living room and felt only a profound sadness. If that is your choice, I said quietly, then I will have to accept it. The finality in my voice seemed to shock her into silence. She stared at me, perhaps finally realizing that her old manipulations no longer worked. You've changed, she said, her voice cold with disappointment. No, Jessica, I replied, standing up. Money hasn't made me cruel. It has made me free. She stormed out without another word, the front door slamming behind her. I stood at the window and watched her peel out of my driveway. The squeal of her tires, the final, angry punctuation to our relationship. Then I turned away from the window and looked around my quiet home. The little girl who loved my bedtime stories was gone. But for the first time, I felt a sense of peace. 3 months passed. The silence from Jessica was absolute, and in that silence, I found a profound clarity. The anger had faded, leaving behind not sadness, but a quiet, firm resolution. It was time to close the book on my old life. The process of leaving the house in Charlotte was less an act of packing and more an act of curating. I kept the things that mattered. My tools, the worn leather armchair where Eleanor used to read, and a single heavy box of photographs. Everything else was sold or given away. It was all just stuff, anchors to a life I no longer wanted. Before the movers loaded the last box onto the truck, I took out my phone, scrolled to Jessica's contact, and pressed block. Some bridges, once burned, aren't meant to be rebuilt. The drive west to Asheville was a liberation. I took the Blue Ridge Parkway, letting the old sedan climb through the rolling, ancient mountains. With every mile that passed, I felt the flat, humid landscape of my old life in Charlotte receding, replaced by crisp mountain air and endless vistas. Here, I wasn't the lottery winner or Jessica's cruel father. I was just Arthur Morgan, a man with a full tank of gas and no rearview mirror. My new house was a modest place on a quiet street, far enough away that any unexpected visits would require a serious, intentional effort. But I wasn't just looking for a new place to sleep. I was looking for a new reason to wake up. I found it on the third day, tucked away on a side street downtown, an old, forgotten auto shop with faded letters on the window that read, Henderson's Classic Auto Restoration. It had been for sale for months. I walked through the dusty bays, inhaling the familiar, sacred scent of motor oil, aging leather, and metal polish. I saw the ghosts of half-finished project cars sleeping under tarps. It felt like coming home. Tom Henderson, the owner, was an old man with hands as calloused as my own. He looked at me, my gray hair, and my retirement-age face, with a friendly skepticism. It's a lot of work, this place, he said, gesturing at a 1967 Mustang waiting patiently for a new engine. Most folks your age are thinking about slowing down, not taking on a project like this. I ran my hand along the Mustang's clean, classic fender, feeling the solid steel beneath my palm. A smile, the first truly joyful one in years, spread across my face. Mr. Henderson, I said, I'm just getting started. Within a month, the old Henderson sign was taken down, replaced by a freshly painted one, Morgan's Classic Restorations. I hired 3 young, talented mechanics from the local community college, kids who were hungry to learn from someone who'd spent a lifetime with his hands on American steel. The sounds of wrenches turning and engines roaring back to life filled the space, chasing away the last of the silence from my old life. But the shop was only part of the plan. I used a portion of the winnings to establish the Eleanor Morgan Foundation, a small, local charity with a simple mission, supporting single fathers through tough times. I remembered my own struggles after Eleanor's death, the loneliness and the financial strain. Now, I could offer a bit of the support I never had. My evenings in Asheville were peaceful. I could walk downtown without feeling the weight of whispered conversations. The local diner served coffee without a side of gossip. A neighbor named Helen brought over a plate of homemade cookies one afternoon. "Just to welcome you," she'd said with a warm, genuine smile. "It's a quiet neighborhood, but we look out for each other." Quiet was exactly what I had been searching for. I thought about Jessica sometimes, but the sharp pain of her betrayal had dulled into a distant, melancholy ache. I realized the money hadn't changed me. It had only revealed what I'd always been underneath years of misguided love and enabling. It had given me the freedom to finally stop being a doormat and start being myself. Occasionally, my phone would ring with an unknown number I suspected was her, but I would simply let it go to voicemail and then delete it without listening. One Thursday evening, I locked up the shop after the team, and I finished a frame-off restoration of a beautiful 1969 Camaro. Driving my simple sedan home, I passed the community center, where a small bronze plaque for my foundation gleamed under the streetlights. I parked for a moment, looking up at the emerging stars in the clear mountain sky. Somewhere out there, Jessica was living with the consequences of her choices. All I could control was what I built from here. Every restored car, every grant my foundation gave, was my vote for a world where character mattered more than money. Back in my small office at the shop, my eyes landed on the lottery ticket. I had framed it and hung it on the wall. It wasn't a trophy celebrating my winnings. It was a reminder. A reminder that sometimes the most valuable gifts come disguised as garbage, and the most necessary lessons in life come wrapped in pain.